I got the call on a Tuesday morning. My grandfather Walter had passed away in his sleep at 83. The man who raised me, who taught me everything about being decent, was gone. He left behind 3 vacation homes, one in Lake Tahoe, one in the Smoky Mountains, and one on the coast of Maine. Properties he had built with his own hands and his own sweat. At his funeral, my father Gregory showed up after 21 years of silence, wearing an expensive suit and a smile that made my stomach turn. He looked at those properties like they were already his. He told everyone he was the rightful heir because he was the biological son. I felt cold dread wash over me, but I trusted my grandfather's will. I had no idea I would have to fight for everything. Before I tell you how a single letter changed everything in that courtroom, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next will show you exactly why sometimes the truth needs to be written down. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I need to tell you about my grandfather first, because without understanding him, none of this makes sense. When I was 7 years old, my father Gregory walked out on my mother Linda and me. Just packed a bag one Thursday afternoon and left with a woman named Diane. No explanation. No goodbye to me. I remember my mother sitting at the kitchen table that night crying so hard she could not breathe. I did not understand what was happening. I just knew my dad was gone and my mom was broken. My grandfather Walter drove 6 hours the next morning to come get us. He was 62, then still strong with hands that were calloused from decades of construction work. He loaded our belongings into his pickup truck and brought us to his house in Pennsylvania. He set up the guest room for my mom and turned his office into my bedroom. He never once complained. He never once made us feel like a burden. He just said, "Family takes care of family." That is what we do. Grandpa Walter worked as a carpenter and a handyman. He woke up every morning at 5 a.m., made coffee in his old percolator, and headed out to whatever job he had lined up. He fixed roofs, built decks, renovated kitchens. He saved every penny he could. On weekends, he taught me how to fish in the creek behind his property. He showed me how to change oil in a car. He helped me with my math homework at the kitchen table, his reading glasses slipping down his nose as he worked through the problems with me. He was patient. He was kind. He was everything a father should be. When I was 19, my mother died from breast cancer. It happened fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Grandpa Walter held her hand in the hospital, and then he held me when I fell apart at her funeral. After she was gone, it was just him and me. He looked at me one evening as we sat on his porch and said, "Carl, you are my real son. You earned this. Everything I build for you." Over the years, Grandpa Walter saved enough money to buy 3 vacation properties. He did not buy them to show off. He bought them because he was smart with money and because he wanted to create something that would last. The cabin in Lake Tahoe needed work when he got it, so he spent 2 summers fixing it up himself. The place in the Smoky Mountains had good bones, but needed new plumbing, which he installed with his own hands. The coastal house in Maine was the last one he bought, a small cottage with a view of the ocean. He rented them out to families, kept the prices fair, and made sure every guest felt welcome. He told me these places were my future. "When I am gone, Carl, these are yours. You take care of them. You make families happy here." I believed him. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. Then he died, and everything changed. The funeral was on a Thursday in late March. It was raining, that cold drizzle that seeps into your bones. We held the service at the small church Grandpa Walter attended for 40 years. There were maybe 30 people there. His old friends, neighbors, a few guys he had worked with on construction crews. I stood at the front, shaking hands, accepting condolences, trying not to break down completely. Then the door opened, and Gregory walked in. I had not seen my father in 21 years. He was 54 now, his hair silver but styled perfectly. He wore a Hugo Boss suit, charcoal gray, with a silk tie. A Rolex glinted on his wrist. Next to him was Diane, the woman he had left us for now his wife. She had dyed blonde hair and too much makeup. Behind them were two people I had never met: Connor, who was 25, and Skylar, who was 23. His stepchildren. Diane's kids from a previous marriage. Gregory did not come to me. He did not offer condolences. He stood near the back, checking his phone. I heard him talking quietly on a call during the service. I caught bits of the conversation. Real estate. Inheritance. Legal rights. My hands clenched into fists. After the service, as people were leaving, Gregory finally approached me. He did not hug me. He just looked me up and down and said, "Carl, you have grown up." His voice was casual, like we were old friends catching up. I could not speak. I just stared at him. He continued, "I heard about the properties. 3 vacation homes. That is impressive. Your grandfather did well for himself." "He was my grandfather," I said quietly. "Where were you?" Gregory smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am here now, and I am his son. That matters in situations like this." Diane stepped forward. "We just want what is fair, Carl. Family should not fight over money." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them to leave, but I just turned and walked away. 3 days later, we gathered at the office of Pearson and Associates for the reading of the will. The office was downtown on the 4th floor of an old brick building. Mr. Pearson was the lawyer, a man in his early 60s with white hair and a serious voice. He had handled my grandfather's affairs for over 20 years. Gregory, Diane, Connor, and Skylar sat on one side of the conference table. I sat on the other with my hands folded, my heart pounding. Mr. Pearson opened the folder containing the will and began to read. The language was formal legal, but the meaning was clear. "I, Walter Eugene Thompson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave all my properties, assets, and financial holdings to my grandson Carl Mitchell Thompson, who has been my true family and the son of my heart." I exhaled. Relief flooded through me. My grandfather had kept his promise. Gregory stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor. His face turned red. "This is ridiculous. I am his son, his biological son. That document cannot be valid." Diane grabbed his arm, but she was glaring at me too. Connor muttered something under his breath. Skylar just stared her mouth tight. Mr. Pearson remained calm. "Mr. Thompson, this will was executed properly. Your father had full mental capacity when he made these decisions. However, you do have the right to contest it if you choose." Gregory leaned over the table, pointing at me. "See you in court, Carl. You think you can take everything? You are just a kid who got lucky living with an old man. I will prove he was manipulated. You will lose everything." I felt cold fear creep up my spine, but I met his eyes. "He chose me because I stayed, because I loved him." Gregory laughed bitterly. "Love does not hold up in court. Blood does." They left. I sat there shaking. 2 weeks later, I received the official court documents. Gregory had hired a lawyer, a woman named Catherine Hartwell. She had a reputation: sharp, aggressive, expensive. The lawsuit claimed undue influence, arguing that I had manipulated my grandfather into changing his will. They wanted the estate split equally between Gregory and me, or even entirely to Gregory as the biological heir. I hired a lawyer too. His name was Jake Morrison. He was 38, kind earnest, but he did not have Catherine's experience. He cost less, which was all I could afford. We met in his small office and he reviewed the case. "Carl, I will be honest with you," Jake said. "They have a strong argument. In cases like this, biological children usually have legal standing. We need to prove that your grandfather made this decision freely and that you did not manipulate him." "I did not manipulate him," I said, my voice breaking. "He raised me. He loved me." "I believe you," Jake said gently. "But we need to prove it in court." That is when things got worse. Gregory and his family launched a campaign to destroy my reputation. Connor started posting on social media claiming I had isolated my grandfather, that I had kept Gregory away. The posts got shared hundreds of times. Friends from college reached out asking if it was true. I felt humiliated. Skylar went to the vacation homes and harassed the tenants. One family renting the Lake Tahoe cabin called me in distress. "There is a woman here claiming these properties will be hers soon. She is taking pictures and making our kids uncomfortable." Diane called friends of my grandfather, people who had known him for decades, and fed them lies. She said I had forbidden Grandpa Walter from seeing Gregory. She painted me as controlling and greedy. I could not sleep. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. My hands shook constantly. I felt like I was drowning. Then I went back to my grandfather's house to start going through his things. I was in the basement sorting through boxes when I found an old file marked "Personal Correspondence." Inside were letters and emails spanning 15 years. I started reading. There was a letter from Gregory dated 12 years ago. He had written to my grandfather asking for money. $50,000 for a business investment. He promised to pay it back with interest. At the bottom of the letter, my grandfather had written in pencil, "Sent the check. Hope this helps him." There was no record of Gregory ever paying it back. I kept digging. I found emails from 5 years ago where Gregory had asked Grandpa Walter about his properties. Still holding on to those vacation homes, Dad must be worth a lot now. Another email. "If you ever think about selling, let me know. I have connections." I found text message printouts from 2 years ago. "Gregory, how are you feeling, Dad? Everything okay with your health?" Another, "Let me know if you need anything. I am here for you." But there was no evidence Gregory had ever visited. No photos, no receipts, nothing. I realized the truth. My father had been circling like a vulture, waiting for my grandfather to die so he could swoop in and take everything. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find and brought it to Jake. He read through it carefully. "This is good, Carl. It shows a pattern of financial interest. But I have to be honest. It proves he is not a good person, but it does not necessarily invalidate his claim to the estate." I felt hopeless. 1 week before the court date, I got a phone call from a woman named Patricia Hughes. She was 62, a retired teacher who rented the Smoky Mountains cabin every summer with her husband. "Carl, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaking. "Your father contacted me. He offered me $5,000 to testify in court that you were cruel to your grandfather. He wanted me to say I saw you yelling at him, neglecting him. It is not true. Your grandfather loved you, but I thought you should know." My blood went cold. "Did you record the call?" "No, but I can testify to what he said." "Mrs. Hughes, would you be willing to call him again and record it?" There was a pause. "Yes, I will do it." She did. She called Gregory back, said she needed to clarify the arrangement, and recorded the entire conversation. He was explicit. $5,000, cash, You just need to say what I told you. Say Carl was controlling. Say he kept the old man away from family. Easy money. She sent me the recording. I sat in my apartment that night staring at my laptop. I had the evidence. I had the recording, but I felt like it was not enough. Courts are cold. Judges see paperwork, hear arguments, make decisions. How could I make them understand what my grandfather meant to me? How could I make them see the truth? That is when I decided to write a letter. I stayed up all night. I wrote about the day my father left. I wrote about my mother crying at the kitchen table. I wrote about Grandpa Walter driving 6 hours to save us. I wrote about the fishing trips, the homework help, the way he never missed a single one of my baseball games. I wrote about my mother's death and how my grandfather held me together when I wanted to fall apart. I wrote about the vacation homes and how he had built them with his own hands, how he had told me they were my future. I wrote about Gregory's letters, the emails, the money he had taken and never returned. I wrote about the recorded phone call, and I wrote about love, real love, the kind that shows up, the kind that stays. I printed the letter, put it in an envelope, and sent it directly to the courthouse addressed to Judge Margaret Caldwell, with a note requesting she read it before the hearing. I did not know if it would matter, but it was all I had left. The day of the hearing arrived. It was mid-July, brutally hot. The temperature hit 95 degrees by 10 a.m. I wore the only suit I owned, a navy blue one I had bought for job interviews. It felt tight around my throat. The courtroom was on the 4th floor, room 4B. The walls were wood-paneled, the benches hard. Everything smelled like old paper and floor polish. Judge Margaret Caldwell sat at the bench. She was 58 with brown hair streaked with gray, pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was serious, unreadable. Gregory sat with Catherine Hartwell at the plaintiff's table. He looked confident. He kept whispering to her, smiling occasionally. Diane, Connor, and Schuyler sat in the row behind him. I heard Diane say quietly, "Once this is done, we can finally get those places listed. I already have a realtor in mind." I sat next to Jake at the defense table. My hands were shaking. I had a copy of the letter in my jacket pocket. I did not know if the judge had read it. I did not know if it would make any difference. The hearing began. Catherine Hartwell stood and presented her case. She was polished, articulate, and ruthless. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward," she said. "Gregory Thompson is the biological son of Walter Thompson. Under Pennsylvania law, biological children have inheritance rights unless explicitly and legally disinherited with clear cause. The will in question leaves everything to the grandson, Carl Thompson, who lived with the decedent for many years. We argue that this living arrangement created an environment where undue influence could occur. Walter Thompson was 83 years old at the time the will was executed. He was vulnerable. Carl Thompson had constant access to him. We believe the will does not reflect Walter Thompson's true wishes, but rather the result of manipulation. She cited case law. She referenced precedents. She made it sound reasonable, logical, almost obvious. Then Gregory took the stand. He wore a somber expression, his voice measured and sad. "Your Honor, I made mistakes when I was younger. I left my family. I am not proud of that. But my father was still my father. I tried to reach out over the years. I sent letters. I called. But Carl made it difficult. He isolated my father from me. I understand my father loved Carl. I am not denying that. But those properties that estate it should be shared. I am willing to split everything 50-50 with Carl. I just want what is fair." It was a performance. A lie wrapped in false humility. I wanted to scream. Connor and Schuyler also testified, saying Gregory was a devoted father to them, a good man who deserved his inheritance. Then it was our turn. Jake presented the letters, the emails, the financial records, showing Gregory had taken $50,000 and never repaid it. He presented the timeline showing Gregory had not visited my grandfather in over 15 years. Catherine objected constantly. Your Honor, these are personal grievances not relevant to the legal question of inheritance rights. Judge Caldwell listened, her face neutral. She took notes. She did not show emotion. Jake played the recording of Gregory trying to bribe Patricia Hughes. The courtroom went silent as Gregory's voice filled the room, offering money for false testimony. Catherine stood immediately. Your Honor, this recording's authenticity has not been verified. We have not had time to examine it. Judge Caldwell held up her hand. I will consider it as evidence, but it will be subject to verification. Then Judge Caldwell did something unexpected. She reached for a folder on her desk, opened it, and pulled out an envelope. My envelope. Before we proceed further, she said, her voice calm but firm. I received a letter from Mr. Carl Thompson. Normally, I do not entertain personal correspondence in matters like this. However, given the nature of this case and the claims being made, I felt it was necessary to review it. Gregory's head snapped toward me. His face went pale. What letter? Judge Caldwell ignored him. She began to read. Not the whole thing, just excerpts. But every word felt like it echoed through the room. Mr. Thompson writes, I was 7 years old when my father walked out. I remember my mother sitting at the kitchen table crying so hard she could not catch her breath. My grandfather drove 6 hours the next day and brought us home. He gave us his house. He gave us his time. He gave us everything. She paused, looked at Gregory, then continued. He writes, my grandfather woke up at 5 a.m. every morning to work. He taught me how to fish, how to fix a car, how to be a man. When my mother died, he held me and told me we would be okay. He said I was his son, not by blood, but by choice. And he meant it. Gregory shifted in his seat. Diane stared at the floor. Judge Caldwell kept reading. He includes evidence here, Your Honor, she said, holding up printouts. Copies of letters from Gregory Thompson requesting $50,000. Copies of emails inquiring about property values. And a recorded phone call where Gregory Thompson offers a witness $5,000 to provide false testimony. She looked directly at Gregory. Mr. Thompson, is it true you attempted to bribe a witness in this case? Gregory stammered. That is, I did not. She misunderstood. I was just... Jake stood. Your Honor, we have the full recording available, Mrs. Patricia Hughes is also willing to testify under oath. Judge Caldwell held up her hand. That will not be necessary at this moment. She turned to the recording device. Play the audio. The room filled with Gregory's voice, again clear and unmistakable. $5,000. Cash. You just need to say Carl was controlling. Say he kept the old man away from family. The silence afterward was deafening. Judge Caldwell set the papers down. She looked at Gregory for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was ice. Mr. Thompson, you abandoned your son when he was 7 years old. According to these records, you never paid child support. You contacted your father only when you needed money or wanted to inquire about assets. And now you have attempted to manipulate this court with false testimony. Gregory tried to speak, but she cut him off. The letter written by Carl Thompson is not just emotional appeal. It is supported by documented evidence. It shows a pattern of behavior that contradicts your claims. Furthermore, Walter Thompson's will is clear. It was executed while he was of sound mind, witnessed properly, and filed legally. There is no evidence of undue influence. There is only evidence of a grandfather who loved his grandson and chose to leave his life's work to the person who cared for him. She picked up her gavel. I rule in favor of Carl Thompson. The will of Walter Eugene Thompson is valid and will be executed as written. All properties and assets will transfer to Carl Thompson as stated. This case is dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Gregory shot to his feet. This is not fair. You cannot. Judge Caldwell's eyes turned hard. Sit down, Mr. Thompson, or I will hold you in contempt of court. Catherine grabbed Gregory's arm and pulled him back into his seat. Diane was crying angry tears, streaking her makeup. Connor punched the armrest of the bench. Skylar just sat frozen, staring at nothing. I sat perfectly still. Tears ran down my face, but I did not make a sound. Judge Caldwell looked at me, and for the first time her expression softened. Mr. Thompson, your grandfather was right to trust you. Honor what he built. Take care of it. I knotted my throat too tight to speak. Thank you, Your Honor. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright July sun. Jake clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, kid. That letter, it was brilliant. It changed everything. I just nodded, still numb. Gregory and his family came out a few minutes later. They did not look at me. They headed straight for their car. But Connor could not help himself. He turned and shouted, "You will regret this!" I stopped walking. I turned around and looked at him, at all of them. My voice was calm. I already lived through my biggest regrets. Losing my mother, losing my grandfather. You cannot hurt me anymore. They left. I drove back to my grandfather's house. I walked through the front door, stood in the living room, where we had watched baseball games together, where we had eaten dinner at the coffee table because the dining room felt too formal. I looked at the photos on the wall. Me and Grandpa fishing. Me graduating college. Christmas mornings. A lifetime of memories. I sat down in his old recliner and said quietly, I did it, Grandpa. I protected what you built. The first week after the trial was hard. The house felt empty. The silence was overwhelming. I cried more than I wanted to admit. Then my best friend Marcus showed up. He was 29, taught high school history, and had known me since college. He brought groceries, cooked dinner, and stayed on the couch for 3 nights. You won in court, Marcus said one evening as we sat on the porch. But do not let anger win in your heart. Your grandfather would not want that. He was right. I started working on the vacation homes. I drove to Lake Tahoe first and spent 2 weeks repainting the exterior, replacing old furniture, updating the kitchen. I made it brighter, warmer. Then I went to the Smoky Mountains property and fixed the porch that had been sagging, planted flowers in the front garden. Finally, I visited the coastal house in Maine. I repaired the deck, cleaned up the small beach in front, and hung new curtains that let in the ocean light. I reconnected with the renters. Mrs. Patricia Hughes and her husband came back that summer. She hugged me tight and said, Your grandfather talked about you constantly. He was so proud of you, Carl. So proud. Other guests shared stories. A couple who had honeymooned at the Lake Tahoe cabin. A family who came to the Smoky Mountains every Thanksgiving. They all remembered Grandpa Walter, his kindness, his care. I started to heal. I realized something important during those months. The properties were not just assets. They were not just money or investments. They were places where families made memories. They were my grandfather's legacy of love, and now they were mine to protect. I kept the rental prices fair. I made sure every family who stayed felt welcome. I added little touches, fresh flowers, local guidebooks, handwritten welcome notes. I wanted people to feel what I had felt growing up with my grandfather, that sense of being cared for. I also started a scholarship fund in Grandpa Walter's name. It provided financial help to kids who had lost a parent, kids who needed support. It felt right. It felt like something he would have wanted. As for my father, I never heard from him again. Part of me wondered if he felt regret. Part of me did not care anymore. I did not hate him. I just felt sorry for him. He had spent his whole life chasing money and missed out on everything that mattered. 6 months after the trial, I sat on the dock at Lake Tahoe. The sun was setting, painting the sky deep orange and red. The water was calm, reflecting the light like a mirror. I thought about the letter I had written, how scared I had been that it would not matter, how close I had come to losing everything. But the truth had won. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was real. I smiled and looked out at the water. Grandpa, wherever you are, I hope you know. Love always wins. Not because it is louder, but because it is real. A family walked by the kids, laughing and chasing each other toward the cabin. They were renting the place for the week. I waved at them, and the father waved back. This was what my grandfather had wanted. This was his dream. And now it was mine too. Have you ever had to fight for something that truly mattered? Have you ever had to prove the truth when everyone doubted you? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe, because these stories matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love and truth always find a way. Thank you for listening. I hope you find the courage to protect what matters most to you, no matter how hard the fight gets. Take care.